I stepped into Mr. Caldwell's office for the will reading and immediately felt Grant's stare burning into the side of my face. The mahogany desk gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the leather chairs creaked as everyone shifted uncomfortably. My brother stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor like nails on a chalkboard. His voice boomed across the small room, filling every corner with his contempt. "Everyone here knows Eleanor's always been the disappointment of this family," he announced, gesturing toward me with a dismissive wave. "Dad wasted years supporting her useless nursing career while the rest of us built something real." My cheeks burned. I looked at my mother, then at my uncle, waiting for someone to tell him to sit down and shut up. Nobody did. They just stared at their hands or the floor, letting his words hang in the air like poison gas. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Then Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, that deliberate sound lawyers make when they're about to change everything. He opened the envelope with slow, practiced movements and began reading. His voice was steady and calm, but when he reached the last line, something shifted in the room. Grant's laughter died mid-breath, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear flicker across his face. "My name is Eleanor Walsh. I'm 32 years old, and I had no idea my father's final gift would be justice." Mr. Caldwell adjusted his reading glasses and explained that Dad had included a sealed clause, one he'd instructed should only be read if family conflict erupted during the reading. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Grant had just provided the perfect trigger. "The primary inheritance goes to Grant Walsh," Caldwell read, and Grant's chest puffed out like a peacock. "However, this inheritance is subject to strict, verifiable conditions." The peacock deflated. All funds must be properly managed and accounted for through quarterly audits. Any misuse of estate funds will result in immediate transfer of control to the designated monitor, Eleanor Walsh, who will have full fiduciary authority. Grant's face went from triumphant red to sickly pale in seconds. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "What the hell does that mean?" he finally managed. "It means your sister has oversight," Caldwell said simply. "Your father was very specific about the terms. Everything must be transparent and properly documented. Miss Walsh will receive quarterly reports, and she has legal standing to challenge any decisions she deems inappropriate." My mother gasped. My uncle coughed. Grant looked at me like I'd just stolen his car. "This is ridiculous," Grant sputtered. "Dad wouldn't." "Your father was very clear," Caldwell interrupted. "He wanted to ensure responsible stewardship of his estate." After everyone filed out, Caldwell touched my elbow gently. "Miss Walsh, could you stay a moment? There's something else your father wanted you to know." In the hallway outside the conference room, Caldwell reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small envelope with my name written in Dad's shaky handwriting. My heart clenched seeing those familiar letters, slightly crooked from the arthritis that had plagued his final years. "Your father gave me specific instructions," Caldwell said quietly. "He wanted you to have this privately." I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single handwritten note on Dad's personal stationery. "Trust Eleanor to do what's right. She always has." Caldwell explained that I wasn't just a passive observer. I had legal recourse if Grant mismanaged the funds. I could petition the court, freeze accounts, even assume full control if the situation warranted it. Dad had given me real power, wrapped in responsibility. "He believed in you," Caldwell said, "even when others didn't." I felt dizzy, like the floor had tilted beneath me. This wasn't just vindication. It was trust, heavy and real, placed on my shoulders by a man who'd seen something in me that the rest of the family had missed. I left the building trying to look composed, but inside, my mind was already working. I'd spent years as a hospice nurse, learning to see patterns, to notice when something was wrong. Those same instincts were humming now. That evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. Grant's voice was low and threatening. "If you even think about interfering with what's rightfully mine, I'll make sure you regret it." I saved the message. I approached the investigation the way I approached patient care, methodically, carefully, documenting everything. My years in nursing had taught me that details mattered, that patterns revealed truth. I started with public records. Our county kept property transfers and business registrations online, free for anyone to search. I spent 3 evenings after my hospital shifts scrolling through documents, cross-referencing addresses and dates. Grant's name appeared more often than I expected, attached to properties I'd never heard him mention. Then I called the bank. Caldwell had filed paperwork giving me limited access as the designated monitor. The banker's voice was professional but cautious as she pulled up the estate accounts. "There are several mortgages against properties listed under the estate," she said. "And some business loans I'm seeing here that were taken out in the last 2 years." "Mortgages?" I repeated. "Dad's house was paid off." "Not according to this, Miss Walsh." My stomach dropped. Grant had been borrowing against Dad's property, using the estate as collateral for his business ventures. None of this had been disclosed during the will reading. I spent the next week making careful calls, requesting statements, building a timeline. Each new piece of information revealed another layer of deception. Then I found it, a single-line item in a quarterly statement. A loan payment to a company called GW Enterprises LLC. Grant's initials. At work the next day, I was checking on Mrs. Patterson in room 304 when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Brenda Morrison, a woman who'd lived 3 houses down from us growing up. She'd worked in Dad's small accounting firm for years before he retired. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you. It's about your father's business. We met for coffee that afternoon." Brenda looked nervous, her hands wrapped around her mug like she needed its warmth despite the summer heat outside. "I probably should have said something sooner," she began. "But I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to cause problems." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a scanned receipt, faded but legible. The header read, "Walsh and Associates Pension Fund." The payment line showed a transfer of $15,000 to GW Enterprises. "Grant told your father it was for business expansion," Brenda said quietly. "But that money was supposed to go to the staff retirement accounts. 3 people lost their pensions when the firm closed, Eleanor. They never knew why." My hands shook as I held the receipt. "He stole from the pension fund?" "I can't prove it was intentional, but the timing was suspicious. Right before your dad got sick." I took photos of the receipt and promised to keep Brenda's name confidential for now. That evening, I brought everything to Caldwell. He listened carefully, taking notes in his precise handwriting. "Document everything," he advised. "We need to build an airtight case." That night, my mother called. Her voice sounded strange, uncertain. "Eleanor, honey, could you come by the house tomorrow? We need to talk." I drove to my parents' house the next afternoon, my stomach churning with anxiety. The place looked the same as always. The blue shutters Dad had painted 5 years ago, the garden Mom had let go wild after he got sick, the porch swing where I'd spent summer evenings reading. Inside, Mom sat at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of her. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "I've been going through your father's files," she said. "Eleanor, did you know about these loans?" I sat down across from her and carefully explained what I'd found. The mortgages, the business loans, the missing pension money. I showed her bank statements, keeping my voice calm and factual, the way I talk to families about difficult diagnoses. "I never knew," Mom whispered. "Grant said he was helping manage things when your father got too sick. He said everything was fine." The front door slammed open. Grant stormed in, his face purple with rage. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted at me. "Poisoning Mom against me? Digging through private business records?" "Nothing's private when it's estate funds," I said quietly. "Dad's will requires transparency." "This is betrayal," Grant spat. "I'm your brother." I pulled out the printed clause from the will and set it on the table. "And I'm the monitor. This is exactly what Dad asked me to do." Grant's hand flew out and punched the wall beside the doorframe. Plaster dust drifted down, settling on an old family photo hanging nearby. The frame cracked, falling to reveal something taped to the back. A small leather notebook. That night, after Grant stormed out and Mom went to bed with a headache, I carefully removed the notebook from behind the photo. Dad's handwriting filled every page, neat columns of dates, names, and amounts. This was a private ledger, hidden away, documenting everything. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, reading by lamplight. Dad had been meticulous, recording conversations with Grant about business deals, noting discrepancies between what Grant claimed and what bank statements showed. There were copies of invoices, references to meetings, even transcribed phone calls. Near the end, I found a page titled simply, Grant, Test of Character. Dad had known. He'd seen what Grant was becoming, and had deliberately structured the will as a moral test, giving Grant enough rope to either prove himself or hang himself. The estate conditions weren't punishment, they were a chance at redemption. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Dad had trusted me to handle this, to be strong enough to do what was right even when it hurt. Then I noticed an entry from just 3 weeks before Dad died. It was a single line. Met with Reed regarding outstanding business debts. Concerned. Reed. I didn't recognize the name, but the notation suggested Dad had been worried enough to document it separately. I took photos of every page, backed them up to 3 different places, and put the original ledger in my safe deposit box the next morning. That afternoon, I started searching for Reed. It took 2 days of searching through Dad's old phone records and cross-referencing the ledger notes, but I finally found a phone number. The man who answered sounded cautious. "This is Eleanor Walsh," I said. "I'm calling about my father's estate. He mentioned you in his records." Silence then. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man. Can we meet? I need to understand some business dealings my brother was involved in." Reed agreed to coffee at a diner outside town. He was in his 50s, wearing a work jacket and tired eyes. He ordered coffee black and didn't touch the menu. "Your brother approached me 2 years ago," Reed explained. "Said he needed a bridge loan for a business opportunity. Used your father's company as collateral. Promised payments within 6 months. Did the payments come?" 3 of them did. Then nothing. I've been trying to reach him for 8 months. He won't return calls, won't answer emails. I'm out $20,000, Miss Walsh. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "Do you have documentation?" He pulled a folder from his jacket. Loan agreements, payment schedules, copies of bounce checks. Everything was signed by Grant, using the business address of Dad's old firm. "I didn't want to cause your father trouble," Reed said. "But I got bills too. I promised to help him recover what Grant owed, properly and legally." He seemed relieved, like he'd been carrying this burden alone for too long. That evening, I was updating my notes when I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Grant's truck. He sat there for 10 minutes, engine running, just staring at my house. Finally, he drove away. The next day, he showed up at Mom's house with flowers and tears. Mom called me after Grant left. She sounded confused and defensive. "He came by this morning," she said. "He was crying, Eleanor. He said you're trying to turn the family against him. Did he explain the missing pension money?" I asked. "Or the loan from Reed? Or the mortgages on Dad's property?" Silence. "I'm not turning anyone against him, Mom. I'm just asking questions Dad's will requires me to ask." I spent my lunch break the next day at the hospice going through patient files when Sylvia Torres approached me. She'd been running a nonprofit that provided home care equipment for terminal patients. I'd referred families to her program dozens of times. "Eleanor, can I talk to you privately?" In the break room, Sylvia pulled out her phone and showed me a business proposal. Grant's name was at the top, along with a description of a partnership opportunity using her nonprofit's reputation to secure funding for a medical supply business. "He never asked permission," Sylvia said, her voice tight with anger. "He just listed us as a partner and tried to get investors. One of them called me asking about our involvement. I had no idea what they were talking about." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's why I'm telling you. Your brother is using people, Eleanor. Using their good names to cover his schemes." She agreed to provide a sworn statement. My credibility in the community was solid. People trusted me because I'd earned that trust through years of showing up, doing the work, caring when it mattered. That afternoon, Grant appeared at the hospice. Right in the main lobby, he started shouting, "You're ruining this family." His voice echoed off the walls, "Lying about me, turning people against me." Several staff members stopped. Patients in wheelchairs looked up. My supervisor came out of her office. And then something remarkable happened. Tracy, one of our nursing assistants, quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. Grant didn't notice. He was too focused on his performance, pointing at me, his voice growing louder with each accusation. "She's jealous," he proclaimed to the gathering crowd. "Always has been. Dad knew I was the successful one, and she can't handle it." I didn't shout back. I'd learned in nursing that the calmest person in a crisis usually wins. So I stood there, hands at my sides, and let him rant. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke quietly. I'm not discussing estate matters in my workplace, Grant. If you have concerns, address them through Mr. Caldwell. Then I turned to Tracy. Could you please send that video to Mr. Caldwell's office? His email is in my phone. Tracy nodded. Grant's face went white as he realized he'd been recorded. That's illegal, he stammered. Actually, my supervisor interjected. This is a public space, and you are creating a disturbance. Security is already on their way. Grant left before security arrived, but the damage was done. He'd revealed himself in front of witnesses, and now there was video evidence of his behavior. That night, I printed a timeline of everything I discovered. The loans, the missing pension funds, Reed's unpaid debt, Sylvia's nonprofit being used without permission. I organized it carefully, added copies of documents, and prepared a package for Caldwell. At midnight, an email arrived in my inbox from an unknown address. The subject line read, "You need to see this." Attached was a photo. The photo showed Grant sitting at a desk, signing papers. The image quality wasn't great. It looked like it had been taken through a window or from across a room, but the watermark in the corner of the document matched the letterhead I'd seen on GW Enterprises. The anonymous email contained one more line. "I have more evidence if you can keep me safe." I forwarded everything to Caldwell immediately, then replied to the anonymous sender. "Your identity will be protected. Send whatever you have." Over the next 2 days, 6 more photos arrived, along with scanned documents showing business deals that had never been reported, payments to mysterious accounts, and transfer records that contradicted everything Grant had claimed. Meanwhile, Grant was working on his own strategy. He posted a video on social media, sitting in what looked like Dad's old study, surrounded by family photos. "My sister is trying to destroy me," he said to the camera, his voice choked with manufactured emotion. "She's always resented my success, and now she's using our father's death to settle old scores. I'm asking for your prayers and support during this difficult time." The video got shared hundreds of times. Family friends commented with sympathy. People I'd known for years started questioning me. Then I got the call from Caldwell. "Eleanor, the bank has frozen one of Grant's accounts. Their internal audit flagged several suspicious transfers that violate the estate terms. This is escalating quickly." I met Caldwell at the bank on Tuesday morning. The manager, a thin woman named Patricia Drummond, looked uncomfortable as she spread statements across the conference room table. "These transfers happened over the last 4 months, she explained, pointing to highlighted lines. "Large sums moving between accounts, often just under reporting thresholds. It triggered our automatic fraud detection. Grant had been moving money carefully, keeping each transaction small enough to avoid attention, but the pattern was clear. He'd been siphoning estate funds into personal accounts, disguising them as business expenses. The estate's protective clauses are now active," Caldwell said. "Under the terms your father established, any proven mismanagement triggers immediate oversight procedures." When Grant found out about the frozen account, he showed up at the bank demanding answers. Patricia refused to see him without legal counsel present. He shouted at the receptionist until security escorted him out. That afternoon, I received a text from Grant. "You have no idea what you've started. I'll destroy you and everything you care about." But he'd already made a critical mistake. That morning, he'd sent an email to someone named Reed, presumably the same Reed I'd spoken with, except he'd put in the wrong email address. The message had bounced back to the estate's legal inbox, which Caldwell monitored. Caldwell called me that evening, and I could hear something like satisfaction in his voice. "Eleanor, you're going to want to read this." The missent email was a goldmine. Grant had typed it quickly, probably angry, and his fingers had transposed 2 letters in Reed's email address. Instead of going to Reed, it had pinged back to the estate's administrative account. "We need to hide the family money before she figures it out," the email read. "I've already moved most of the liquid assets into the LLC accounts. Reed, I'll get you paid once this blows over, but you have to keep quiet about the original loan terms. If anyone asks, say it was a legitimate business investment, not collateral from the estate." It wasn't quite a confession, but it was close enough. The email showed intent to conceal, to deceive, and to pay off a creditor with knowledge that could damage Grant's position. Caldwell filed the email as evidence with the court overseeing the estate. He also sent a copy to the bank's fraud investigation unit. "This changes everything," Caldwell told me. "Your brother's own words are going to be his undoing." I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. But Grant had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. Grant must have realized his mistake, because the next day he called Caldwell's office directly, demanding an emergency review of the will. He claimed Caldwell was biased, that I'd manipulated the process, that Dad hadn't been in his right mind when he drafted the estate terms. Caldwell calmly agreed to a formal review. "We'll need to conduct a recorded deposition, Mr. Walsh. I'll have my assistant schedule it for next week." Grant agreed, probably thinking he could talk his way out of trouble the way he always had. He had no idea what he was walking into. The deposition took place in a conference room downtown, with a court reporter and 2 witnesses present. Grant arrived with his own lawyer, a sleek man named Bryson who'd built a career defending people who confused arrogance with intelligence. Caldwell started gently asking basic questions about Grant's role in managing Dad's affairs during his illness. Grant was confident at first, describing himself as the responsible son who'd stepped up when needed. Then Caldwell asked about the mortgages. "Those were necessary business moves," Grant said smoothly. "Dad understood the value of leveraging assets." "Did your father authorize these mortgages?" "He trusted me to make sound financial decisions." "That's not what I asked. Did he specifically authorize taking out mortgages on property he owned outright?" Grant hesitated. It was implied consent. He knew I was handling his affairs. Caldwell pulled out bank records. "These mortgages were initiated 4 months before your father's death, when he was in hospice care. Were you his power of attorney at that time?" "I was managing things." "That's not a legal designation, Mr. Walsh. Yes or no, were you his legal power of attorney?" "Not technically, but..." "So these mortgages were taken out without proper authorization?" Grant's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Each question revealed another inconsistency, another convenient memory lapse, another decision made without proper authority. The deposition lasted 3 hours. By the end, Grant looked exhausted and trapped. 2 days later, a subpoena arrived at his house from an external investigator hired by Reed's lawyer. The investigator's name was Franklin Torres, and he had the methodical patience of someone who'd spent decades following paper trails. He came recommended by the court and had credentials that made both lawyers sit up straight. Torres requested access to all estate accounts, business records, and correspondence. Over 2 weeks, he built a timeline that was damning in its clarity. He discovered that GW Enterprises LLC was a shell company Grant had created, listing himself as the sole owner. The company had no employees, no real business activity, just an address registered to a mailbox service. It existed purely as a vehicle to move money. Torres found 3 other similar companies, all with Grant's name hidden behind layers of paperwork. Money flowed between them in patterns designed to confuse auditors, but Torres had seen these schemes before. He also discovered kickbacks, payments Grant had received from vendors he'd hired using estate funds. Each payment was listed as consulting fees or business development, but none of the services could be verified. The report landed on Caldwell's desk like a bomb. "This is fraud," Torres concluded. "Clear, documented, prosecutable fraud." Grant stopped showing up to family dinners. He stopped returning phone calls. Mom said he'd been sleeping on a friend's couch, too ashamed to face her questions. Then Torres found the missing trust fund. Dad had established a small trust specifically for Mom's care, separate from the main estate. It was supposed to be untouchable, protected, guaranteed to provide for her regardless of what happened to other assets. The account was empty. "The transfers started 8 months ago," Torres explained. "Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones. The money was moved to one of the shell companies, then distributed among various accounts. This triggered an emergency clause in the will. When protected funds were endangered or misappropriated, control temporarily passed to the monitor, me, pending a full court review. I never wanted this. I'd never wanted power or control. I just wanted fairness, accountability, the basic honesty Dad had tried to teach us both. But now I sat at the long dining table in Dad's house, papers spread before me, and felt the weight of real responsibility. Not the performative kind Grant had always claimed, but the actual burden of making decisions that affected people's lives. Mom sat across from me, her face pale and drawn. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we protect what's left," I said. "And we make sure Grant faces consequences." That evening, Marcus Hale, one of Dad's oldest friends, called me. His voice was worried. "Eleanor, Grant approached me yesterday. He's planning something. He mentioned hiring a specialist lawyer to disqualify you as monitor. Said he's going to prove you're emotionally biased and unfit to oversee the estate." I thanked Marcus and immediately called Caldwell. "Let him try," Caldwell said. "We'll be ready." Grant's new lawyer, a woman named Victoria Cross, filed a motion claiming I was emotionally compromised and therefore unfit to serve as a state monitor. The petition included character statements from people Grant had convinced I was vindictive, along with references to my known resentment of his success. They even tried to use my career against me, suggesting that as a hospice nurse, I was too emotionally involved with death and loss to make rational financial decisions. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent the weekend preparing my testimony with Caldwell. "They're going to try to make you emotional," he warned. "They'll bring up your father, your relationship with Grant, everything they think will make you react." "I work with dying patients every day," I said quietly. "I've learned how to stay calm when it matters." In court, Victoria Cross painted me as a bitter sister who'd used Dad's illness as an opportunity to seize control. She brought up old disagreements, childhood rivalries, even my decision to become a nurse instead of joining Dad's business. "Miss Walsh has demonstrated a pattern of distancing herself from family business," Cross argued. "She has no financial experience, no business training, and a clear emotional bias against my client." When it was my turn to testify, I spoke calmly about my role in Dad's care during his final months. I explained the nursing training that taught me to document carefully, to follow protocols, to make decisions based on evidence rather than emotion. "I didn't ask for this responsibility," I said, "but my father trusted me with it, and I've tried to honor that trust by following the law and protecting what he built." Caldwell presented the evidence methodically: the fraud report, the missing trust fund, Grant's own emails, testimony from Reed and Sylvia Torres. The judge listened carefully, occasionally making notes. After 3 hours, she ruled to keep me as monitor pending a full hearing on the estate's management. Grant and Victoria left the courthouse in silence. That night, someone leaked a photo to a local blog. The photo showed Dad in his hospital bed during his final weeks, looking frail and tired. Attached was a story claiming he'd been manipulated in his final days, that his will had been influenced by a daughter who'd isolated him from his son. It was a complete fabrication, but it spread quickly online. People who didn't know the full story shared it with sympathetic comments about elder abuse and family betrayal. I felt sick reading the comments, seeing Dad's private suffering turned into propaganda. But then something unexpected happened. The hospice where I worked published a response. My supervisor, along with 3 nurses who'd cared for Dad, wrote an op-ed for the local paper describing Dad's mental clarity during his final months, his thoughtful questions about his estate, and his specific requests about how things should be handled. "We witnessed firsthand the loving care Eleanor provided," they wrote, "and we also witnessed her father's clear, deliberate wishes regarding his estate. Any suggestion of manipulation is not only false but offensive to a dying man's final decisions." Sylvia Torres shared the op-ed, along with her own statement about Grant's attempt to use her nonprofit's name without permission. Reed posted a brief comment on his business page about outstanding debts and broken promises. The tide of public opinion shifted. People started asking questions, looking at evidence, seeing past Grant's performance. But Grant wasn't done. Desperate and cornered, he made one more terrible decision. Dad's will explicitly stated that certain properties couldn't be sold without family consent, particularly the lake house where we'd spent summers as kids. It was designated for Mom's use, with provisions for eventual transfer to both Grant and me. Grant tried to sell it anyway. He'd found a buyer overseas, someone who wanted American real estate and didn't ask too many questions. The sale documents showed a price well below market value. Grant was willing to take a loss just to get liquid cash he could hide. The buyer's bank, doing routine verification, discover the property was part of an estate under legal review. They immediately halted the transaction and contacted Caldwell. This triggers automatic stop clauses, Caldwell explained when he called me, and it demonstrates willful violation of estate terms. The overseas buyer's lawyer was furious, threatening to sue Grant for misrepresentation. The buyer had already put down a deposit that Grant had apparently already spent. Grant claimed the sale was necessary to cover debts, but the court saw it for what it was, another attempt to strip assets before they could be protected. Then one of Grant's former business partners, a man named Vincent Shaw, contacted Caldwell requesting a meeting. "I need to come clean about something," Vincent said, "and I think it'll help your case." Vincent Shaw had worked with Grant on several business deals over the past 3 years. He came to Caldwell's office nervous but determined, carrying a briefcase full of documents. "Grant made me help him fabricate investor meetings," Vincent explained. "We create fake presentations, stage calls with actors pretending to be interested investors, all to convince your father's business partners that there was real interest in expansion projects." "Why would you do that?" Caldwell asked. "Because I was stupid and broke, and Grant promised me a cut once the money came through. But the money was estate funds, and now I realize I helped him commit fraud." Vincent provided sworn testimony describing how Grant had manufactured false business opportunities to justify taking out loans against estate property. He had copies of fake investor proposals, recorded calls, even emails discussing how to make the schemes look legitimate. With Vincent's testimony, the court tightened protective orders on all remaining estate assets. Nothing could be moved, sold, or transferred without court approval. Grant's behavior became erratic. He sent me texts alternating between pleading forgiveness and threatening legal destruction. He showed up at Mom's house at odd hours, trying to convince her that I'd turned everyone against him. Mom called me one evening, her voice fragile. "Marcus Hale called. He says your father left one more letter, sealed, meant to be read only if things got to this point." "Did he say what's in it?" "No, but Marcus thinks it's important. He's bringing it to Caldwell's office tomorrow." The sealed letter was presented in a small, court-sanctioned session with just the immediate family present. Marcus Hale had kept it in his safe deposit box, following Dad's instructions to deliver it only if Grant's management of the estate was challenged in court. Caldwell broke the seal carefully and read aloud. "To my children," Dad's letter began. "If you're reading this, it means my fears about Grant's character were justified. I didn't want to believe my son would choose greed over family, but I had to prepare for that possibility." The room was silent except for Caldwell's voice. "Grant, I gave you every opportunity to prove yourself worthy of trust. I structured the will to test your character, not to punish you, but to see if you would rise to responsibility or fall to temptation. If you're hearing this letter, it means you've chosen the latter." Grant's face was ashen, his hands trembling in his lap. "Eleanor, I'm sorry to place this burden on you. But you've always had the integrity I tried to teach both my children. You see people clearly, treat them fairly, and do the right thing even when it costs you. That's why I trusted you with this responsibility." The letter concluded with specific instructions. "Any attempt to slander, financially harm, or otherwise deceive in the management of my estate will result in immediate and total forfeiture of inheritance claims. Let this be my final testament to what I value, not wealth but character." The judge overseeing the case was present. She looked at Grant with something close to pity. "Mr. Walsh, you're going to need to make a decision," she said. "The final hearing is scheduled for 3 days from now. I suggest you use that time wisely." Grant showed up at my apartment late that night. I saw him through the window, pacing on my doorstep, running his hands through his hair. Finally, he knocked. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Please," he said. His voice was raw, nothing like the confident brother who'd called me a disappointment weeks ago. "I need you to help me." "Help you how?" "In court. Tell them I've learned my lesson. Tell them I'll pay everything back. Tell them," his voice broke, "tell them I'm not the person Dad's letter described." "Are you?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something real in his eyes. Fear, shame, maybe even genuine remorse. "I can change," he whispered, "if you give me a chance." I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that my brother could still become someone Dad would be proud of. I'll help you, I said, but on my terms. You'll enter therapy. You'll attend mediated family counseling. You'll repay Reed, make restitution to the pension fund, and apologize to Sylvia Torres. You'll accept full accountability, not just perform regret. And if I do all that, then maybe we can rebuild something. But I won't cover for you, Grant. I won't lie to the court or pretend things are okay when they're not. That's the help I can offer. Honesty and the chance to do better. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was weighing whether sincere change was worth it, or if he could find another way to manipulate the situation. Then he shook his head. You're just like everyone else. You want to watch me suffer. He walked away, and I knew then that he'd chosen pride over redemption. The next morning, Caldwell called. The final hearing is tomorrow. The judge will read the enforcement clause and make her ruling. Are you ready? The courtroom felt cold despite the summer heat outside. Grant sat with Victoria Cross at one table, his posture defensive. I sat with Caldwell at another, my hands folded, trying to project a calm I didn't entirely feel. The judge entered, and everyone stood. She settled into her chair with a stack of documents and a serious expression. I've reviewed all submitted evidence, she began. The testimonies, the financial records, the investigator's report, and the sealed letter from the deceased. This case has revealed systematic mismanagement and deliberate fraud in the handling of the estate. Victoria Cross tried to interject, but the judge held up her hand. Miss Cross, your client has had multiple opportunities to demonstrate accountability. Instead, he's attempted to sell protected property, move funds illegally, and engaged in slander to avoid consequences. The pattern is clear and documented. She turned to the papers before her. The will of the deceased included specific provisions for this exact scenario. Mr. Caldwell, please read the final enforcement clause aloud. Caldwell stood and read in his measured lawyer's voice. If the primary heir is found to have engaged in fraud, slander, misrepresentation, or financial exploitation in the management of this estate, all inheritance rights will immediately and irrevocably transfer to the designated monitor. This transfer is automatic upon judicial finding and requires no additional action. The judge nodded. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Grant Walsh has violated the terms of his father's will through documented fraud and mismanagement. The estate's assets will be transferred to Eleanor Walsh, effective immediately. Grant made a choking sound. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Walsh will be required to make full restitution to all affected parties, including creditors and the pension fund. This is a civil matter, but I'm referring the fraud findings to the prosecutor's office for review. The clerk reached for the final page of documentation, ready to record the official order. The clerk read the formal transfer order aloud, her voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. Each word felt heavy, final, like a door closing on one part of my life and opening onto something unknown. All assets of the Walsh estate, including properties, accounts, and business holdings, are hereby transferred to Eleanor Walsh, who will serve as primary executor and beneficiary. Grant Walsh retains no claim or authority over said assets, pending fulfillment of court-ordered restitution. The judge signed the order with 3 precise strokes. The sound of her pen scratching across paper was the loudest thing in the room. Grant sat motionless, his face empty. Victoria Cross gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. Caldwell squeezed my shoulder gently. It's done, he said quietly. Outside the courthouse, Grant stumbled on the steps. His legs seemed to give out, and he collapsed onto the concrete, his hands covering his face. Mom rushed to him, her voice high and frightened. Grant, get up. Please, just get up. He looked up at her, then at me, and for the first time I saw my brother completely broken. Not performing, not manipulating, just genuinely shattered by consequences he'd never believed would come. I'm sorry, he said, but I didn't know who he was talking to. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired and sad and certain that I'd done what Dad had asked me to do. The hard part was just beginning. 3 weeks later, I stood in Dad's house holding the keys that now legally belonged to me. The place felt different, quieter somehow, like it knew its owner had changed. Grant had moved into a small apartment across town. He'd started making restitution payments, small amounts every month that would take years to complete. He'd agreed to therapy after the court made it a condition of avoiding criminal prosecution. I'd arranged for Mom to stay in the house for as long as she wanted. I'd set up proper accounts for the pension fund victims and worked with Sylvia Torres to ensure her nonprofit's reputation was restored. Reed had been paid in full from estate funds, with a formal apology. The community response surprised me. People who'd once judged me, who believed Grant's version of events, now brought casseroles and offers of help. My phone buzzed constantly with messages thanking me for doing the right thing. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because Dad had trusted me to be strong enough to handle the truth, even when the truth was painful. Grant called one evening. His voice was different now, quieter, less certain. "I've been going to therapy like the court ordered," he said. "My counselor says I have to take accountability for what I did. Not just say it, but actually feel it." "That's good, Grant. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." "I know," I said. And I meant it. Healing would take time, if it came at all. But for now, I'd protected what Dad built and honored the trust he'd placed in me. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from someone I'd helped through hospice months ago. "Thank you for everything. You're proof that good people still win sometimes." I looked around Dad's house, at the photos on the walls and the furniture he'd chosen, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stayed true to who I was, even when it would have been easier to walk away. That was Dad's final gift to me. Not money or property, but the chance to prove to myself that I had the strength to do what was right. And I had